Hey everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of Birdfeeding with Kurtis. So the whole idea of this podcast is to sort of converge what I do on YouTube with how I interact with people in my store. So my whole life really is about helping people find and enjoy the hobby of bird feeding and to combat the misinformation out there and help people avoid issues and fix issues. So I've been doing this on YouTube in a more formal style where I pick a topic, talk about it, edit it, and help people out. And I kind of prefer to sit down and have more of a conversational style about things. So because of that, I decided, well, you know what, let's just do sort of an unfiltered, unedited podcast version of bird feeding talk. And I don't really have, a particular plan or goal for where I want this to go necessarily. It's just kind of an experiment and something that I wanted to try out. So if you leave a comment in the video and sort of, just express your interest or things you'd like to hear about or talk about, that would be awesome. And every time you like and comment on any of my YouTube videos, it is really helpful in growing the channel. And I want to do this for a career on top of running my bird feeding store. So, all the help that I can get from you, I don't want to ask too much, but if you can like and comment on the videos, it means an awful lot. So now that we've kind of got the intro out of the way, I'd like to just sort of describe myself a little bit, and then we can kind of dive into a subject and see kind of where this podcast takes us. So my name's Kurtis, and I own a bird feeding store in Kamloops, British Columbia, in the interior region of British Columbia, Canada. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I started feeding the birds where I was working with a couple of co-workers. And through that, I got pretty interested in observing, these were just crows, and, it kind of fascinated me that these crows learned how to time, our coffee breaks and lunch breaks. And so I started bringing, my leftover dinner to work because there was just something about providing these crows with food that it just did something for me. So I ended up going to a hardware store and I found a bird feeder and a bag of seed sitting beside it. Thought, you know what, why not? Let's just put a bird feeder up in the yard and see what happens. And pretty early on, like the first couple hours after hanging it, I could sort of see where this was going. The sort of anticipation of seeing a bird land on it became pretty strong. And for me, we didn't have a lot of birds in our neighborhood. There was very little bird feeding activity, new development, and not a lot of natural habitat, which really promoted a lot of birds. So I ended up getting a bird landing on my feeder almost right away, like within a couple hours, which when people come into our store and I sell them a bird feeder for the first time, I do not give them the expectation that a bird is going to land on their feeder within the first day. Weeks, I've seen months for people to attract birds. The circumstances are all different. So I got a bird right away and I was able to get a picture of the bird, and then became the obsession of trying to figure out one by one every bird that came to my yard. In my instance, it ended up being a house sparrow. So I wanted to know, because I'm curious about everything that I do, what is it? What is it like? Why is it at my feeder? Why is it behaving the way it behaves? And really the motivation of my curiosity was, how do I optimize my bird feeding to make this bird's life easier, better, happier, whatever it be. So this quickly snowballed as I eventually started attracting doves and then magpies and woodpeckers, and one by one I started to learn more and more. For instance, when the dove arrived, I noticed this thing's not up on the feeder, it's pecking away at the ground. Why is it down there when all the other birds are up on the feeder? So I learned, oh, they like to eat off the ground. So I'm reading that they like grain. So I went to the store and I'm buying oats and all these things, which they never ended up eating anyways. But it was the experimentation and the curiosity which really drove me to wanting to understand more. And that whole concept snowballed as I learned that the birdseed was spilling all over the ground. The magpies were spraying the food out of the bird feeder. I tried new seeds, and the seed wouldn't come out of the holes of my bird feeder. So next thing you know, I'm taking my bird feeders to work, and I'm grinding them and welding them, and I'm welding trays to the bottom of them and cutting the holes bigger and painting them, and trying to create this magic bird feeder to solve all my bird feeding problems. And over time, I started experimenting with different food, and that is when everything clicked. My problems weren't my bird feeder. My problems were the food that I was using. And when I came to realize that, wow, there is a bag of seed that I can buy and put in a bird feeder, and it solves my mess, and it's attracting different birds that I've never seen before, and the bird feeding experience was becoming more and more exciting and less frustrating. That was the moment for me where I realized I need to help people get to this point, because there's not really a whole lot of more excitement than figuring out how to do something and do it well, and do it well enough that it actually, enriches your life. So for me, that's kind of the start to finish of my journey. Now, I guess the part that I never really anticipated was opening up a bird feeding store. It's, in retrospect, kind of a crazy thing that, this 28-year-old kid who was like 6 months into bird feeding and just completely obsessed with this new passion, was going to try and scrape together my life savings to open a bird feeding store to help other people, just because I was so desperate to share my passion and joy. So that is kind of how I started and how I got here. And then over time, what I realized was I know so much about bird feeding, and I care so much about bird feeding, and I care so much about birds, but I didn't really have the skills to communicate that very well to people. And that's when I started doing YouTube videos, and some of my most popular videos on YouTube, they're pretty tough to watch. Really, for me, they're a tough watch, and they get lots of views, and people mostly comment nice things on them. Sometimes people, they let me know that they're seeing what I see too, but most people are pretty kind and enjoy the information. And through time, I've got more comfortable in front of the camera. I've got a little better at editing. I'm far from an expert, but not for lack of effort or trying. So through speaking in front of the camera and learning how to connect with people, I've kind of realized that, it's been really amazing for me to help people in our community find bird feeding, enjoy bird feeding, and the amount of bird seed I sell in a month, we're talking tons and tons, literally, of bird seed. And I go to bed every night knowing that my efforts feed a lot of birds, and it's hard to express how meaningful that is to me. That being said, I want to be able to do it on a larger scale. So that's where my online work comes in. I want to help people find bird feeding. I want to help people enjoy bird feeding the same way that I do. And I want to help people help birds, because ultimately that is my goal. It's a strange purpose in life that isn't really a point of relatability with any of my peers. I'm lucky that I do run a bird feeding store, because I talk to dozens of like-minded people every day. But my friends and family, some of them understand, a lot of them don't, and that's okay, because for me it's incredibly fulfilling, and I just want to share that with everybody. So for the next little while, I'm just going to start diving into some subjects. I don't really have like a laid out plan of where I want to take the podcast necessarily. I think it's really important for me to give information, but not just spew off information. I want to give information in a way that is relatable, understandable, comprehensible. I want to be able to give information that is going to actually make a difference, because I've come to realize that bird feeding is controversial, and to me, that is just one of the most insane things and difficult things for me to comprehend. Feeding the birds is controversial. Just let that sit. It shouldn't be. Feeding the birds should not be controversial. Science, in the process of trying to prove this hypothesis that bird feeding negatively affects birds, has over and over again proven the opposite, that, it doesn't prevent migration. Bird feeding doesn't make birds dependent. It doesn't ruin their natural foraging abilities. In fact, every measurable data point, whether it's nesting, migration, winter survival, every marker is vastly improved when birds have access to supplemental food like bird feeders. A lot of myths sound good. People humanize these ideas, and they spread like wildfire. So I kind of want to tackle these things one by one in a way that is digestible, because there's so much bad information. And I have to be honest, before I started getting into YouTube, I would just go and look at some other creators' channels and sort of listen to their thoughts and ideas. And people who are getting hundreds and thousands and millions of views, and within the first 30 seconds, there'd often be false information given. And not to criticize them, they're just repeating the same talking points that are, expressed over and over. But we need to do better in this industry. So, you know what? I'll do it. I love doing it. It's something I want to do. It's something I would love to do for the rest of my life. I'm lucky I've found purpose, I've found passion, and I'm curious. So with those three things combined, let's get to the bottom of all of this stuff. Let's get to the bottom of the myths. Let's get to the bottom of the proper bird feeders. Let's get to the bottom of the proper bird seed. Let's get to the bottom of the bird feeding industry. I understand the bird feeding industry because I work in it. I understand the commodity markets, what the going price for black oil sunflower is, how that reflects the amount of actual edible food hardware store suppliers actually put in their bird seed mixes compared to the stuff the birds don't eat, flick onto the ground, and create the giant mess, which makes your life miserable. So let's get to the bottom of it. I think that's a good place to wrap for the first episode. I hope you understand me a little bit better. I want to continue to understand you. And we're gonna just sit down, we're gonna just talk about bird feeding. I'm gonna hopefully get better at talking solo, because for now these podcasts are gonna be solo, although I'd love to do some interviews and learn some new skills there. But for now, we're gonna do them solo, and I'm gonna try to create a product that's actually watchable. So if you watch this all the way to the end, one, thank you, that's amazing. I can't believe I was able to keep your interest so long. I'd love for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment. You know, just do an emoji if you want, but let me know what you think. Did it suck? I don't want to hear that, but I need to know the truth. So let's just keep chipping away at this, and we're gonna make bird feeding a better hobby, a better industry, and we're gonna get more people into it, and we're gonna get more birds, you know, taken care of, because they're struggling out there and they need our help. So let's do that. I am Kurtis. This is Bird Feeding with Kurtis, and thanks so much for watching the first episode. See you later.